Trapped in darkness for 18 years, a lost girl escapes her chains only to be found by a lawyer with a secret connection to her past. Will she reclaim her stolen identity? Will justice prevail against greed and betrayal? And could love bloom amidst the chaos? Hit that play button to dive into this gripping tale of survival, mystery, and a bond that defies all odds. Don't miss the shocking twists. Subscribe for more. Jonathan Blake was a well-known defense attorney, a champion of the oppressed. His life revolved solely around courtrooms and hearings. He cared little for anything outside of work. But everything changed the day he saw a young woman on the side of the road, eating grass. What shook him more than her disturbing state was the birthmark on her shoulder. It was identical to the mark of the only daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the American South, missing for over a year. "Where did you get this mark?" he asked, barely able to believe what he was seeing. "Tell me, Sophie, where did you get this? Why do you have it?" Sophie froze. She looked completely stunned and swallowed hard. I don't know," she stammered, her voice trembling. "You don't remember? Were you a child when you got it? Were you in an accident?" Jonathan's questions came rapidly, his emotions beginning to spill from his chest. Sophie only shook her head, unsure of what to say. "I don't remember anything." Her world was dark. The four corners of that dilapidated room were all she knew. Every time she opened her eyes, the cracked ceiling above greeted her first thing in the morning, last thing at night. When she spoke, dust entered her mouth. The walls were old, clawed, scarred remnants of a desperate escape, maybe even her own. She didn't know. She had no idea how many days, weeks, months, or years had passed since she'd been imprisoned there. Time became like smoke, vanishing into air. No watch, no calendar, not even sunlight to measure the hours. That room was her entire world. In one corner stood a broken mirror. She looked at herself, sometimes rarely, but every time she did, she didn't recognize the reflection. Hollow eyes, sallow skin, hair long and disheveled, wild from neglect. She couldn't remember what she looked like when she was happy, when she was free, when she was a child. She remembered only that she was happy before the room. She didn't know what happened to her or how she got there. But she always held on to one hope, that one day the door would swing open and light would pour in. A voice would call out, "Sophie, let's go, you're free now." But every day, silence answered instead. At night, she curled in a corner, hugging herself, muffling her sobs with trembling palms. Even in captivity, she had learned to fear noise. Her only nightly wish was simple. Just once, let her escape. Let her see the sky, not the crumbling ceiling, but the real sky. The one they said was blue. She had forgotten what birds looked like. She heard their songs through a narrow crack in the steel window, but never saw them. Sometimes she wondered, what do trees look like? Are leaves still green? She wanted to feel the wind, not the foul, stagnant air of the room, but wind that brushed skin like the embrace of freedom. She wanted to see the world, people's smiles, the buzz of traffic, the sunlight that didn't blind or burn. But all she had were dreams, dreams that reality drowned day after day. "I don't want to die here," she whispered to the wall, her voice weak. "I want to live. I want to feel light. Just once." But there was no hope. She didn't know anything about the outside world. That room was her earth. She didn't know how to interact, how to live. What was normal? What was life supposed to be? All she knew was the cracked ceiling, the worn-out mat, the tiny shaft of light that slipped through the wall every noon. That beam of light reminded her there was something beyond the darkness, freedom, but she could only watch it. Her chains kept her from even reaching the sunbeam. They were heavy, tight, painful. They left grooves on her skin. Then, a knock on the door. It opened slowly. In walked Miss Clara, the elderly woman who was her only human contact. She wasn't a threat. In fact, she might have been Sophie's only ally. She wasn't sure if Clara was a god who pitied her, or someone who actually cared. "Eat, child," Clara said softly, her voice warm. "You haven't eaten all day." Sophie looked at the tray in her hands. Old rice, a spoonful of meat, a glass of water. She didn't speak. Miss Clara placed the tray beside her and sat on the edge of the old mattress. Gently, she lifted the spoon and fed Sophie, who was too used to being fed to resist. How could she eat on her own with chains restricting her hands? She chewed quietly. With every bite, Clara felt a growing weight in her chest. She stared at the girl's innocent face, still smooth despite the dirt around her. Her eyes were blank, devoid of knowledge, like a child who knew nothing of the world's evil. "Is it good?" she asked, trying to smile. Sophie nodded slightly, still silent but respectful. She wasn't rude. Despite everything she'd endured, she wasn't a lost soul, just someone who had never been allowed to live a normal life. Clara stroked her hair, full of motherly affection. "I'm sorry, child," she whispered. "If only I could get you out now. But I can't fight them. I can't save you. I pray to God every day. He will save you. He will." Sophie didn't understand. She didn't know who God was. She didn't know what salvation meant. All she knew was that she didn't want to live in the dark. She didn't want to wake up to chains anymore. She didn't want her only glimpse of light to come from a crack in the wall. She didn't want to see the faces of those who kidnapped her ever again. But in every gentle touch and forced smile Clara gave her, Sophie felt a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't fully abandoned her. Clara, too, was breaking inside. Sophie was innocent, clueless about the evil surrounding her. And in every silent prayer as she combed the girl's hair, Clara begged, "I hope you get out, child. I hope your story doesn't end here." The hallway was dark as Clara slowly stepped out of Sophie's room. She carried the now empty tray. "Thank you," Sophie had whispered earlier. Just 2 simple words, but enough to shatter Clara's heart. Sophie rarely spoke, and for her to express gratitude, Clara could feel the girl's trust. As Clara walked down the long hallway, she overheard muffled voices, familiar onesmen from the group who had kidnapped Sophie. Hired thugs, now guards of that hellish room. She moved quietly toward the wall, pressed her back against it, and listened. "Dude, you think the guy who ordered this even cares anymore? It's been months since we last heard anything." "Yeah, man. No more payment. No more instructions. Our contact said to just let it be. Do what we want." "Well, then, why don't we enjoy her?" "It's a waste, man. She's still fresh, pale, innocent. We haven't had fun in a long time." Clara felt like the heavens and earth crashed on her. Her throat went dry. Her hands trembled. The tray in her grip began to shake. In her panic, she bumped into a wooden beam. It fell with a loud crash. The hallway fell silent. "What was that?" one of the men shouted. "Someone there?" Clara stumbled backward. Her heart raced. She had no choice but to hide. Quickly, she slipped into an open room and gently shut the door, leaving a narrow gap to peek through. "Maybe it was just that stray cat," one of them said. "Make sure no one's out here. Maybe it was the old lady. You know, she's not supposed to meddle." "Relax. Even if it was her, she won't snitch. She's too scared." Clara's chest tightened even more. But it wasn't fear that heated her eyes, now it was rage, deep, seething hatred. She would never allow them to touch Sophie. She would not let these monsters destroy what little dignity the girl had left. She had cared for Sophie for so long. That girl was like her own daughter now. More than ever, Clara knew she had to act. While the men laughed again and resumed their filthy discussion, Clara lifted her gaze. She wiped away her tears. She buried her fear. In her mind, the decision was clear. She would never let their plan succeed, even if it cost her life. That night was quiet. Only the faint chirping of crickets and the rustle of wind against broken windows filled the air of that abandoned building. Inside the dark and filthy room, Sophie slept soundly, not because she felt safe, but because she was exhausted from fighting every night. Then a faint sound stirred her. Her eyes fluttered open, still adjusting to a sudden light coming from a small flashlight. She gasped, heart racing. She feared it might be one of the men who watched her from the shadows. "Sophie, wake up, sweetheart." "It's me." The old woman revealed her face. "Clara." Her hand shook as she held a bundle of keys. "Miss Clara." Sophie's voice was faint. "What are you doing?" Clara stepped forward and began unlocking the chains around her wrists and ankles. Metal clinked with every release. Clara's hands trembled, each key turned echoing in the silence of the night. "I'm getting you out of here," she whispered, still focused on the final lock. "Don't ask questions. There's no time, but don't be afraid. I gave the guards sleeping pills. They're out cold now, but we have to go before they wake up." At last, the chains were off. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Sophie could raise her arms, free of weight, free of metal. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Clara. "What do I do? Where do I go? I don't know what's out there." Clara stroked her hair like she always did when Sophie was scared. "I know, child, but this is your chance. Don't waste it. Go live your life out there. You'll see the clouds, the sun, the grass, the birdsong, the things you've dreamed of." "Come with me," Sophie pleaded. "We can escape together." Clara shook her head. "I can't, sweetheart. If I disappear now, they'll know I helped you. They might come after you. It's safer if I stay behind." But Clara gently touched her lips with a finger. "What matters now is that you leave. You live. You start over. Be free for me." Sophie couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Her whole body shook with emotion, fear, joy, sorrow. "I love you, child," Clara whispered. "Always remember that. You are like a daughter to me." Sophie embraced her tightly. She didn't want to let go. Then they heard faint rustling from the hallway. Clara turned and gently pushed Sophie toward a small, hidden door at the back of the building. Secret passage. Only she knew. "Go, hurry. Don't look back. Don't stop. Run until you're far away. Don't ever come back, Sophie. This is your only chance." Sophie nodded, crying. Her feet, so used to cold concrete, now moved for freedom. She slipped through the narrow opening. It was cramped, filthy, but it was the way out. With every step, her heartbeat quickened. Her breathing deepened. Then she felt it fresh, cool air. She reached the outer fence, climbed it. Her palms bled. Her knees wobbled. She jumped. For the first time in so long, she felt grass beneath her feet. She was free. Back in the room that was once her prison, Clara stood in the dark, holding back tears. "I'm sorry, child," she whispered. "May you find freedom for the rest of your life." Sophie kept running. She didn't know where to go, only that she had to get away. Just like Clara told her, she had to escape that place, escape the darkness, the fear, the hungry eyes of those men. Her feet hurt. Her skin was scratched by thorns. Her arms bled. Her knees were raw, but there was no time to feel pain. All that mattered was to keep going. Eventually, the sun rose. Its first rays kissed her face. Sophie stopped, panting, covered in sweat, barely able to walk. She sat by the roadside in the tall grass, finally too weak to move. She was starving. She hadn't eaten properly in days. There was no one in sight, no help, no Clara. She didn't know where she was. But one thing was clear. This was the outside world, the one she once thought was just a dream. She looked around green fields, distant trees, a breeze that smelled different, real. To someone like her, who had lived in darkness so long, the view felt like heaven. Tired but smiling faintly, she saw the orange sky for the first time. She saw clouds that moved, a sun that wasn't peeking through a crack but whole, bright and warm. She breathed for a few minutes, trying to gather strength. Then she stood and walked slowly, unsure, limping, every step heavy, but she pressed on. She reached the edge of another road. It was wide, bustling with vehicles she didn't recognize, loud sounds she'd never heard before. She stepped back in fear. To her, the cars were monsters, huge and roaring, moving fast. She hid in the grass, shaking. She stayed there until nightfall. Her stomach cried out, her body twisted in pain. She looked around, still no one. No food, no water. Driven by hunger, she picked some grass and ate it. It tasted awful bitter, rough, sharp against her throat, but the hunger was unbearable. As she chewed, she broke down, sobbing by the roadside. Then a car stopped. A sleek black vehicle pulled up in front of her. Her heart pounded. She froze, grass still in her mouth. The door slowly opened. A tall man in black stepped out. She struggled to stand, Her knees shook, her body weak. But before she could fully rise, her vision blurred. Sound faded, the world spun, then everything went dark. The man stared at her. Stunned, thin, filthy, wounded girl, completely unconscious. Her clothes looked like rags. Her skin was bruised and scarred. Jonathan Blake couldn't believe his eyes. He knelt beside her, touched the back of his hand to her nose. She was still breathing, but barely. No one else was around. He thought of the hospital, but it was too far. She might not survive the trip. He had no choice. Carefully, he lifted her in his arms. She was light, feverish. "I'll save you," he whispered. He placed her in the back of his car and drove. In under 30 minutes, they reached his ancestral home, far from the city, quiet, safe. As soon as he opened the gate, his longtime housekeeper, Margaret, rushed out. "Jonathan, what happened? Who is that girl? She's hurt, unconscious." "I found her by the road. I didn't take her to the hospital. It's too far. Please help me." Margaret's face went pale. She gently touched the girl's cheek. "My God, what happened to this poor child?" Jonathan carried the unconscious girl into one of the guest rooms, with Margaret following closely behind. The other household staff and driver who had been nearby stood frozen in shock. After placing her on the bed, Margaret immediately went to work, cleaning her wounds, wiping off the dirt, applying ointments, and changing her into a soft, old cotton dress. As Jonathan watched the scene unfold, he let out a heavy sigh. "Thank you, Margaret. I honestly don't know what I would have done without you." Margaret looked at him with sorrowful, knowing eyes. "This girl doesn't look like she was just abandoned. It seems like she was running away from something," she said gently. Jonathan nodded. He felt it too. "When I'm done with the case I'm handling right now, I'll help her find her family. But for now, I think it's best we keep her hidden from whoever she was escaping from. Don't worry, son. We'll take care of her," Margaret assured him. Jonathan nodded in gratitude. "Thank you, Margaret." The next morning, Jonathan woke early. Despite the exhaustion and worry from the night before, he had to attend a very important court hearing, a human rights case. In the kitchen, dressed in a polo shirt and dark slacks, he sipped coffee while speaking seriously to the staff. "I have somewhere important to go this morning. I might not be home until late tonight," he said. "Please, watch over the girl in the guest room. Don't scare her, don't touch her, make sure she's fed, given water, and let her rest." "Yes, Mr. Jonathan," they replied in unison. "We'll take care of her." Jonathan sighed and nodded, then left the house. Meanwhile, carrying a tray with hot porridge, a boiled egg, and warm milk, Margaret carefully entered the guest room. Every step was gentle. She didn't want to startle the girl. As she opened the door, she found the girl beginning to wake. Her eyes were still heavy with sleep. But as soon as she spotted Margaret holding a tray of food, she jolted upright, visibly afraid, clutching the blanket and trying to hide behind it. Margaret offered a soft smile to show she meant no harm. "It's good to see you awake, sweetie," she said kindly. "I brought you something to eat. Just porridge for now, something light for your stomach." The girl didn't speak. The fear in her eyes was still too strong. Her expression was one of deep anxiety, like a bird terrified of being caged again. Margaret noticed this. So she sat gently on the edge of the bed and placed the tray on a small table. In an even softer tone, she spoke again. "Don't be afraid, dear. I'm not a bad person. I won't hurt you. I won't turn you in. I won't take you back to where you came from." The girl seemed to breathe a little easier, though she remained silent. "Eat first, child. I'm sure you're starving." Margaret picked up the spoon and slowly brought it to the girl's lips. She didn't resist. As she ate, a change slowly crept into her eyes, from panic to uncertainty, then to slight calm. "What's your name, dear?" Margaret asked while gently feeding her. The girl remained quiet, as if she were still deciding whether or not to answer. "Sophie," she finally said. Margaret smiled, a light warmth spreading in the room. "What's your last name, dear?" Sophie didn't respond. She only looked at Margaret with wide, innocent eyes. "Don't you have a last name?" Margaret asked again. Still no answer. Margaret assumed she either didn't want to say or didn't know. "Well, I'm Margaret, but you can just call me Miss Maggie." Sophie didn't reply. But she listened. Margaret continued. You're at my employer's house now. His name is Jonathan. He's the man who found you by the road last night. He brought you here to help you. Sophie looked at her, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She didn't know whether to believe it or not, whether or not she was truly safe. We don't want to hurt you here, dear, Margaret added. We just want to help you. You were in such a terrible state when he found you. If you need anything, just let us know. Sophie remained quiet, but eventually nodded slowly. After she finished the porridge Margaret offered, the older woman carefully took the tray and set it aside. She glanced back at Sophie. Her face had regained a little color. She looked more alive than yesterday. All right, dear, Margaret said gently. Why don't you go take a bath? It'll help you feel better. All that sweat and dust isn't good for your skin. She pointed to a door inside the room. The bathroom's over there. Sophie nodded and stood up quietly. Every move was cautious, as if she still wasn't sure any of this was real. She walked to the bathroom, glancing around curiously. The white tiles, the mirror above the sink, and other unfamiliar objects overwhelmed her. She closed the door and carefully locked it. She entered slowly, unsure of where to begin. She approached a strange metallic object, a showerhead. She had never seen one before. Back where she was held, there were only buckets and wash basins, often under a watchful eye. She touched the faucet underneath. Suddenly, cold water burst out from the showerhead. She screamed and recoiled in shock, pressing herself into a corner of the bathroom, pale and shaking. Margaret heard the scream and rushed inside without hesitation. She immediately saw the running water from the shower and Sophie crouched in fear. My God, child, Margaret whispered, stepping closer gently. You don't know how to use this, do you? Sophie shook her head. Oh, sweetheart, Margaret said, turning off the water. It's all right. Come sit in the bathtub. I'll help you. You don't need to be afraid. She guided Sophie to the tub and gently poured warm water over her body using a dipper. As she bathed her, Margaret noticed the faded scars on her back. I won't ask questions if you don't want to talk, she said softly. But, child, it's clear you didn't grow up like most people. Sophie remained silent, her head bowed. After rinsing and drying her, Margaret wrapped her in a towel. Before helping her into clean clothes, she handed her a toothbrush and toothpaste. Go on, brush your teeth too. Sophie took the brush, but didn't know what to do with it. She looked at Margaret, confusion in her eyes. You don't know this either? Margaret asked gently. Sophie nodded slowly. Miss Clara used to brush my teeth for me, she said in a small voice. Oh, sweetheart, Margaret whispered. What kind of place were you in where they didn't even teach you how to care for yourself? Sophie didn't reply. Margaret walked over, applied toothpaste, and gently began brushing her teeth for her. As she did, she caught a glimpse of Sophie, watching her reflection in the mirror curious, almost amazed. To Margaret, she was just a child, innocent, deprived of what it meant to live freely, someone whose right to learn had been stolen. After brushing her teeth, Margaret dressed Sophie in a soft, pale duster. It suited her delicate skin. Margaret carefully combed her long hair and tucked strands behind her ears. You look beautiful, dear, Margaret said, beaming. You're all set now. Come downstairs with me. There are people I want you to meet. Sophie hesitated but nodded softly, gripping Margaret's arm as they walked down the hallway toward the stairs. As she walked, Sophie looked around at the high white ceilings, the polished furnishings, things she had never seen before. Every step was careful, as though afraid to damage the floor beneath her. At the top of the stairs, they were met by several house staff cleaning. Two men stood off to the side. One of them was Jonathan's longtime driver, Henry, sipping coffee, and the other was the mansion's gardener. Everyone froze upon seeing Sophie. My God, one of the maids whispered. She's beautiful. Though dressed simply, Sophie's beauty was undeniable. Her hair was long, her skin smooth and fair, and her face held the innocence of an angel, especially as she hid slightly behind Margaret. Don't be afraid of us, said one of the maids, Emma, with a kind tone. We're good people here. We'll take care of you. Sophie nodded, though fear was still present in her eyes. She looked at each of them, then lowered her gaze. What happened to that girl? Miss Maggie asked Nana, another elderly housemaid. Why does she look so frightened? And why was she in such a terrible state when Mr. Jonathan brought her in? Yes, Miss Maggie, Emma added. We thought she was just a beggar last night, but now she looks like an actress. You can tell she's got good genes. Margaret said nothing for a moment as she helped Sophie down the stairs. Once they were on the ground floor, she spoke gently. We don't know the full story yet, she said, as she rubbed Sophie's back to soothe her. But from what I see, she's not a bad person. She's just been through something terrible. Maybe Mr. Jonathan felt sorry for her. That's why he helped her. Emma walked closer and gave Sophie a quick glance from head to toe, letting out a deep sigh. Whatever she's been through, I'm just glad she ended up here. Out there, with people like her. It's dangerous. Someone might try to take advantage of her. Sophie turned away slightly, holding back tears. But for the first time in her life, surrounded by strangers' concerned eyes, she didn't feel the need to run. That evening, Jonathan came home from the court hearing. His steps were heavy as he got out of the car, a hint of disappointment on his face. Holding his phone in one hand, he opened the front door and was greeted by the cool air conditioning and the soft light of the living room. He hadn't even stepped fully inside when Margaret appeared from the hallway. Mr. Jonathan, she said, hesitating. He glanced at her, his brow furrowed. What is it, Margaret? Behind her, the silhouette of a young woman was partially visible, hiding timidly in the background. I just wanted to introduce you to Sophie, Margaret said, glancing back. She's the girl you helped last night. Jonathan looked at her. For the first time, he saw her clearly. Her long hair, her simple dress, though thin and still weak, her beauty stood out. Her skin was fair, her wide eyes innocent but anxious, her expression uncertain. He stared at her. Now he really saw her face, unlike the night he'd found her unconscious on the roadside. Oh, it's her, he said calmly with a hint of surprise. Margaret nodded and motioned for Sophie to come closer. Fear still lingered in her eyes, but she stepped forward slowly. Jonathan, however, was visibly exhausted. He rubbed his temples and said, I'll talk to her tomorrow. I'm too tired right now, Margaret. Without another word, he walked past them and went upstairs. His footsteps were heavy. Sophie remained beside Margaret, clutching the hem of her dress. Margaret turned to her and offered a small smile. Don't take it personally, dear. My boss is a good man. He's probably just really tired today. He just came from a court hearing. Sophie stayed quiet and nodded slightly. Upstairs in his room, Jonathan sat on the edge of his bed and sighed deeply. He removed his tie and leaned his head back against the headboard. Now I have to worry about her too, he murmured, referring to the new responsibility that had unexpectedly entered his life. Despite his exhaustion from the day's hearing, Jonathan didn't even bother to eat. As soon as he reached his room, he lay down and immediately fell asleep, still in his suit. The next morning, Jonathan woke up early. His head still throbbed from stress and fatigue, but work awaited him. After showering and dressing, he headed to the kitchen. As he walked in, he stopped abruptly at what he saw. There stood Sophie beside Margaret, holding tightly to the edge of the older woman's dress like a child clinging to a parent. Her eyes were alert but full of anxiety. Margaret? Jonathan called. She turned around. Oh, sir, you're up. What's going on with her? He asked, his tone uncertain. She won't leave my side, Margaret explained. She seems really scared. She had a nightmare last night and came down with a fever. Jonathan looked at Sophie but said nothing. He turned away and walked to the dining table, taking a seat while waiting for his coffee. One of the housemaids approached and gently placed a cup in front of him. Thank you, he said briefly. As he sipped his coffee, Jonathan could feel Sophie's gaze on him. He looked up, and there they were, her innocent, questioning eyes staring right at him. He studied her for a moment, then sighed and raised an eyebrow. What are you staring at? Startled, Sophie blinked and quickly looked away, shaking her head slowly as if she didn't understand the question. Jonathan sighed again. Come here. Sit down. He pointed to the chair across from him. Sophie glanced at Margaret, who gave her an encouraging nod. Slowly, she walked over and sat down. What's your name? Jonathan asked calmly. She sat still like a statue, eyes locked on him, but saying nothing. Jonathan frowned. Name, he repeated, lowering his voice slightly. She only looked at him again, then shook her head gently. No understanding. Where are you from? How old are you? Still no answer. Just a blank stare. Do you even understand me? He asked, now sounding slightly irritated and worn out. Sophie looked at Margaret, almost pleading. Sir, Margaret said as she walked over, maybe she doesn't understand what you're saying. Jonathan fell silent and observed her again. Her expression remained blank, though her body was tense with unease. He took a deep breath and asked again in a softer tone, What's your name? She blinked once, then smiled faintly. Sophie. Last name? He asked. She doesn't want to say it. Or maybe she doesn't even know what that means, Margaret answered for her. Jonathan nodded. Where are you from? Where's your family? Sophie shook her head slowly. She didn't know. Jonathan didn't ask anything further. It was clear he wouldn't get answers from her except for her name. Days passed, and Jonathan barely had time to talk to Sophie again. He wanted to help, wanted to know where she came from, whether she had family. But his ongoing legal case consumed his days and nights, meetings, paperwork, hearings, non-stop. Pressure mounted with every passing day. New evidence, new witnesses, deeper conspiracies. Even people he trusted in the case began to seem questionable. It was late at night, past 11, when Jonathan finally came home. The house was quiet. Only the hallway light and a dim lamp in the living room remained on. He entered slowly, set his briefcase down, and removed his coat. Exhausted, physically and mentally, he sank into the couch, leaned back, and closed his eyes, massaging the bridge of his nose to ease the headache. He didn't expect to hear the soft approach of footsteps. Suddenly, a soft voice broke the silence. Then, Jonathan looked up and saw Sophie. She was standing nearby, wearing a plain white nightgown, probably one given by the maids, or maybe one that belonged to his sister, who was currently vacationing in Switzerland for 3 months. Jonathan didn't know how long she had been standing there, but she seemed to have been watching him quietly for some time. He raised an eyebrow. "Why are you still awake?" he asked, his voice rough from exhaustion. Sophie didn't answer. She simply stepped closer and sat down at the end of the couch, only a few inches away from him. She sat quietly, her face turned toward him, studying his every move like she was trying to understand him. Jonathan sighed again. "You should be asleep," he said in a softer tone. "It's late still." Sophie said nothing. She kept her eyes on him. "Don't you talk at all?" he asked again. Now he was looking directly into her eyes, so innocent, but hiding something deeper, something sorrowful. Then, unexpectedly, Sophie smiled, not forced, not fake, just a small, sincere smile, one filled with gratitude. "Thank you for helping me," she said softly but clearly. Jonathan was stunned. He didn't expect that smile. He blinked a few times, then smiled back, albeit awkwardly. "It's nothing," he replied. "Don't mention it." After a few seconds of silence, he tried asking again, "Do you have a family?" Sophie's brow furrowed slightly. She didn't seem to understand the question. "Family?" Jonathan explained. "Like mother, father, sister, brother, people who love you, who raised you." Sophie stared at him for a while. "You know, the people who brought you up. You don't have any?" She slowly shook her head, not because she didn't want to answer, but because she didn't know. "None?" Jonathan asked again, his voice gentler now. Another slow shake of the head. This time it carried more weight. "So, where are you from? Why were you in such a condition when I found you?" "I ran away." Jonathan's brows furrowed. "You ran away?" She nodded slowly. "Clara said so. She told me to run." "Then you have a mother. This Clara, is she your mother?" Confusion returned to Sophie's eyes. She looked directly at Jonathan but said nothing. "Were you kidnapped?" Jonathan asked again. "Why did she tell you to run?" Sophie looked down at her wrists. Slowly, she raised her arm and showed it to Jonathan. He stared, confused. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just knew I had to get away and leave her behind." Jonathan realized she was struggling. "It's okay," he said gently. "You don't have to answer anything now." He leaned back on the couch and closed his eyes for a moment. In his heart, He knew he had just taken on a much bigger responsibility than he'd expected. When he opened his eyes again, he turned to Sophie, who still looked deeply saddened. "When everything is settled," he said seriously, "I'll help you find your family." Sophie looked at him and smiled again, softly, silently. She didn't speak, but her expression said she understood. Over 2 weeks passed since Jonathan last had time to focus on Sophie's situation. His hearings were relentless, with constant document reviews and no rest. But finally, after exhausting preparation, they won the case. Overwhelmed with joy and relief, Jonathan was congratulated by colleagues and clients. Driving home with his junior attorney, David Reed, Jonathan steered the conversation to personal matters. "It's finally over," he said, leaning back in his seat, tired but content. "Yes, sir, we won," David replied with a small laugh. Jonathan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "But sir," David said, flipping through papers on his tablet, "you mentioned that girl at your house, the one with amnesia." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Yes. Why?" "While digging through old cases for our defense, I stumbled on something intriguing." David opened a scanned article from a digital police archive and showed it to Jonathan. "There's a case about a missing girl, 6 years old, who vanished after a mysterious fire at a private hospital. The cause of the fire was never determined. Only one body was found. Not the girl's. The report says she was the daughter of a prominent family, the Montgomerys. They've never stopped looking for her, still hoping she's alive." Jonathan stared at the screen, where an old photo showed a small girl with long hair and sad, fearful eyes. He couldn't explain why, but a strange feeling stirred in his chest, a chill running down his spine. "What's the last name?" he asked, his tone serious. "Montgomery," David replied. "They've been a powerful family for years. The girl's name was Lily Marie Montgomery, but her family called her Lily." Jonathan stiffened, not because he was certain, but because the name felt familiar, as if he'd heard it before. Pieces of a puzzle seemed to click in his mind. "Does she look like her?" David asked. Jonathan didn't answer immediately. Studying the photo, the shape of her face, her eyes, her lips, he recalled Sophie's eyes, innocent, quiet, but deep. "I don't know," he said finally. "But I have a hunch. They're still offering a reward for information about her. And based on what you said about her age, she'd be around the same age as the missing girl." Jonathan looked out the window, silent for a moment before speaking. "Find out everything you can about that girl, David. The date of the fire, the nurses on duty, the hospital, everything. If you can access forensic reports, I want copies." David nodded. "Noted, sir. I'll get on it." As the car moved toward home, Jonathan carried a new mission to help Sophie. The night was quiet, broken only by the soft ticking of the wall clock in Jonathan's study and the rustle of pages as he read articles and reports about the girl missing for over a decade. His laptop was open, multiple tabs displaying archived news, police reports, and family appeals from the Montgomerys. In one old photo of Lily Marie Montgomery, he noticed a detail he'd missed before: a small, teardrop-shaped birthmark on her shoulder, a unique family identifier, subtle unless closely inspected. He paused, staring at the image, his brow furrowing. A chill ran down his neck. He stood and went downstairs to the kitchen to make coffee, hoping to ease his unease and fatigue. Entering the kitchen, he saw Sophie sitting on a stool near the counter holding a glass of milk. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Margaret stepped out for a bit," she said softly. "I couldn't sleep, so I'm having some milk." Jonathan nodded. "Okay." He went to the coffee maker, pouring hot water into a cup, stealing glances at Sophie. She seemed more relaxed, adjusting to her surroundings. After drinking, she stood and walked to the sink to place her glass. Her sleeveless top shifted, revealing her shoulder, and there it was, the teardrop-shaped mark from the photo. Jonathan's eyes widened, as if doused with cold water. His heart raced. He couldn't move. Confirming what he saw, he stepped forward and firmly grasped her wrist. Sophie, startled, looked at him, fear and confusion in her eyes. "Where did you get that mark?" he asked, barely believing it. "Tell me, Sophie, where did you get it? Why do you have it?" Sophie froze, swallowing hard. "I don't know, sir," she said, her voice shaking. You don't remember? Were you young when you got it? Did you have an accident? His questions came quickly, emotions spilling out. Sophie shook her head, unsure how to answer. I don't remember anything. Before Jonathan could ask more, Margaret entered, puzzled by the scene. What's going on here? She asked. Jonathan quickly released Sophie's wrist, as if snapping out of a trance. Nothing, Margaret, he said hurriedly. I just got startled. I thought I saw something. Don't mind it. Margaret looked at Sophie, noticing her slightly reddened wrist where Jonathan had held her. Are you sure, dear? She asked, hesitant. Jonathan nodded, avoiding her gaze. Yes, Margaret. I'm probably just tired. Sophie stayed silent, not moving, gently rubbing her wrist. Jonathan turned, forcing himself to calm down. But inside, he felt as if cold water had been poured over him at the possibility that this girl, who had appeared in his life so suddenly, might be the child long missing. Sought by the wealthiest family with vast businesses in the Midwest. All night, Jonathan studied documents, old reports, and photos of the missing Lily Marie Montgomery. He pieced together every detail: her age, the shoulder mark, her physical traits, and the media interviews where her parents repeatedly said they never stopped believing their daughter was alive. He took a photo of Sophie, captured unknowingly while she was in the garden, and compared it to Lily's picture. Sophie's features were finer. She was taller, quieter, but their eyes were identical: the shape of her face, her nose, the faint smile. He no longer doubted Sophie and Lily were the same person. The next day, he spoke to his close friend at the law firm, attorney Samuel Wright. Samuel, I need your help, Jonathan said in a conference room. Is this about the girl staying at your house? Samuel asked. Yes, Jonathan replied. I think she's Lily Montgomery, the girl who went missing 18 years ago in a hospital fire. She has a birthmark on her shoulder, same location, same shape. All the details, age, story, even facial similarities match. Samuel looked shocked. Montgomery? They're one of the most powerful families in the country. Exactly. That's why I need to know if my hunch is right so she can return to them if she's Lily. Unbeknownst to them, a man in a dark gray suit stood quietly near the conference room's open door, overhearing everything. With power and wealth at stake, he was already plotting something sinister. It was late when Jonathan drove home, tired and lost in thought, navigating a dark, nearly deserted road. As he neared an intersection, a black SUV suddenly blocked his path. He braked hard. 3 armed men in black, looking like bodyguards, stepped out. Before he could react, the SUV's door opened, and a man emerged, dressed in an expensive suit, holding a cane despite no apparent disability. Jonathan lowered his window to address the issue. Attorney Blake, the man said, his voice cold. We've heard you're investigating something you shouldn't be meddling in. Jonathan didn't respond, stepping out of his car, showing no fear. Give us the girl, the man continued. You don't need to know why. You don't need to get involved. Jonathan shook his head. I don't know what girl you're talking about. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. Don't play dumb, attorney. I know you know who we mean. You must be mistaken, sir. I have no idea who you're referring to. The man's jaw clenched. The girl in your care, the one you suspect is the missing Montgomery heir. Jonathan didn't know how he knew about Sophie. He suspected Samuel or David might be involved, as they were the only ones aware, but he didn't want to judge them. Having trusted them for years, he chose to play ignorant. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop pretending, Attorney Blake, the man snapped. Hand over what we want, and I promise nothing bad will happen to you. He smirked. Don't make an enemy of me. You're a lawyer. You know my game. You know how quickly people who know too much can disappear. Jonathan stayed calm, unfazed. If necessary, we'll kill you, the man added, his threat clear. Jonathan smiled, a confident, fearless smile. I'm Attorney Jonathan Blake. My name carries weight in courts, in the media, and among those who uphold justice. I don't just practice law, I embody it. If I suddenly vanish or end up dead, it won't go unnoticed. The man paused, his brow furrowing. You underestimate me, and that's your biggest mistake. You think I'm just another obstacle to eliminate, someone you can silence? But I didn't build this name, this reputation, by being reckless. Jonathan smirked, seeing the unease in the man's eyes. Kill me? Think carefully. I have backups for every move I make. People are watching, and if anything happens to me, you'll be the first the law drags down. Tension filled the air. The wealthy man signaled his men, who nodded and retreated to the SUV. This isn't over, Attorney Blake, he said, stepping back. Not all lawyers live long. The SUV drove off, leaving Jonathan on the dark road. He took a deep breath, knowing this was far from over. He couldn't act recklessly. As a lawyer with a name that carried weight, a mistake could ruin not only Sophie's life but also the reputation he'd spent his life building. While reviewing data on his laptop birth records, old DNA samples, trauma reports from the fire, and Montgomery family media interviews, Jonathan's belief grew stronger. But he wouldn't draw conclusions without solid evidence. One night, driving home from his office, he received a text from an unknown number. Give us the girl. This is your final warning, Attorney Blake. You won't like what happens if you don't. He glanced around the dark parking lot, a chill on his neck. He knew these weren't empty threats. They would act if he didn't comply. Thankfully, his sister was abroad and had no plans to return soon. He called her, instructing her not to come back until things were resolved and to stay cautious. Given his work, she understood the danger and promised to follow his advice. Jonathan decided to keep Sophie hidden from those seeking her until he was certain of his suspicions, avoiding hasty moves. The next morning, he called a friend in a rural area, asking to use his secluded lake house on a remote island, far from the city, safe from danger. Sophie, he said that morning, looking at her as she sat on the house's veranda, gazing at the sky. We're going somewhere. She turned to him, smiling peacefully. Where are we going? Somewhere quiet. We'll stay there while I sort some things out. Without questions, she went with him, always trusting him, perhaps because he had saved her. On the island, Sophie's spirit slowly returned. She learned to walk by the lake, eat fresh fruit, and laugh again. In their daily moments together, Jonathan couldn't deny a growing affection for her, not shallow or fleeting, but deep and real. Her smiles, her glances, the time she handed him a towel after swimming in the lake, they became partners, even if unspoken. But despite his feelings, he never forgot why he brought her there. He never took advantage or pressured her. Instead, he spent nights in his study, gathering information and working with a private investigator. After nearly 2 weeks, he finally contacted the Montgomery family. One night, as Sophie slept soundly in their small cottage, Jonathan sat by her bed, holding his phone with Lily's photo. He studied her peaceful face, more beautiful now, healthier, her eyes free of fear. Softly, he spoke. If you are Lily Marie Montgomery, I'll return you to your family. It's your right to know them, and their right to have you back. He took a deep breath, his chest heavy. But I don't know why. I don't want to lose you. The night was quiet, with only the sound of waves from the window. You've been with me for 2 months, and every day, I don't know when or how, my concern for you became more than just a lawyer's duty. But as someone who's come to hope, you'll stay. He gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. I don't know what will happen next, but I hope, even if you learn who you really are, you'll remember me. He looked at her once more, then stood. That night, he knew the truth was near, but with each step toward Sophie's past, he felt his own emotions cast in shadow. The next morning, a loud hum broke the island's silence. Jonathan peered from the cottage's veranda, while Sophie prepared breakfast inside. From the sky, 2 helicopters approached the Montgomerys, the guests he'd long awaited. One chopper landed on a wide open area of the island. A tall, distinguished older man, Mr. Montgomery, and a refined woman, Mrs. Montgomery, clearly from an aristocratic family, stepped out. Jonathan approached to greet them, stopping before the couple. Welcome, he said softly. Are you Attorney Jonathan Blake? Mr. Montgomery asked. Yes, sir, Jonathan replied humbly. You sent the message about Lily? Mrs. Montgomery asked, her voice trembling. Yes, ma'am. There's someone I'd like you to meet. He glanced back. Sophie emerged from the cottage, wearing a simple white dress, curious about the visitors. She approached, seeing Jonathan with the unfamiliar guests. The Montgomerys froze, as if struck by lightning. Mrs. Montgomery's eyes filled with tears, and Mr. Montgomery stepped back, his lips trembling. "Lily," he whispered. "My daughter! My daughter!" Mrs. Montgomery cried, rushing forward and hugging Sophie tightly, unwilling to let go. Sophie stood still, stunned by the embrace, looking to Jonathan, who remained silent. Mr. Montgomery joined them, sobbing openly. "My child, Lily, forgive us for not finding you sooner," he said, holding them tightly. Sophie stood motionless, unsure of her feelings, overwhelmed by a reality she didn't know whether to believe. She looked at Jonathan, seeking answers.
"Jonathan, who are they?"
she asked softly, barely audible. He approached, placing a hand gently on her back. "They might be the family you never knew, Sophie, the family that's been looking for you, your real family?" Sophie's eyes widened, tears blurring her vision. Questions swirled, but one thing was certain: the warmth of that embrace, the pain in the couple's hearts, and the inexplicable connection in their eyes. Through her tears, she looked at Jonathan again. If this is true, if they're really... She couldn't finish. Mrs. Montgomery hugged her again, saying, "Lily Marie Montgomery, that's your full name, my child. You'll never be taken from us again." Beside them, Jonathan stood quietly, but in his heart, he felt the sting of an approaching goodbye. After the emotional reunion, the Montgomerys and Jonathan decided to conduct a formal DNA test to confirm if Sophie was indeed Lily Marie Montgomery, their long-lost daughter. Though hope overflowed in the couple's hearts, they feared another disappointment. In a private Chicago hospital, the DNA test was conducted discreetly, with tight security. Jonathan explained everything to the Montgomerys: the circumstances of Sophie's rescue, the documents he'd researched, and the mark matching the missing child's. "For now, it's best we don't go public," Jonathan said firmly as the four sat in a private hospital room. "Why?" Mr. Montgomery asked. "Some people want Sophie or Lily. One is a wealthy man who's threatened me multiple times. They know she's tied to a big truth. If the public learns she might be Lily, her life will be in greater danger." Mrs. Montgomery held Sophie's hand, nodding. "We'll do everything to protect her." Hours later, the family returned to their temporary city residence, leaving Jonathan and Sophie in a quiet living room at his place. The night was still, with a gentle breeze outside and soft ceiling light illuminating their talk. Sophie sat silently, staring out the window, unsure of what to say or feel. Jonathan approached with 2 cups of tea sitting beside her. He placed a cup on the table. "Sophie," he called softly. She looked at him, and he smiled, a forced but trusting smile. He touched her cheek. "I really hope you're Lily," he whispered. "I want you to find your real family. I want your life to be okay, so you don't have to hide, fear, or wonder where you belong." Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. "What if I'm not her? If you're not Lily, I won't stop until we know the truth about who you are. You'll stay with me until we figure it out. But if you are her, I'll be even happier, knowing a daughter is returning to parents who nearly lost hope." They sat in silence. The only sound, the unspoken beat of their emotions, heavy and deep. A week later, the Montgomerys didn't stop investigating. They used every connection to uncover how, where, and why Lily disappeared. They cross-checked old fire cases, missing records, and interviewed former nurses and doctors from the burned hospital. One afternoon in the hospital where the DNA test was conducted, Jonathan, Sophie, and the Montgomerys gathered again. A doctor entered, holding a document. Mrs. Montgomery stood, her hands trembling. "Doctor?" The doctor smiled. "The DNA test results are positive. Sophie is Lily Marie Montgomery, your missing daughter." Time seemed to stop. Mrs. Montgomery sobbed, hugging Sophie. Mr. Montgomery clutched his chest, tears streaming as he approached and embraced his wife and daughter. Sophie sat stunned, tears falling. She didn't need to ask or speak. Jonathan understood. She was indeed Lily Marie Montgomery, the start of reclaiming the life stolen from her by tragedy. Jonathan stood nearby, smiling quietly, but behind his eyes was a pang of sorrow, knowing the girl he'd come to love in their short time together would soon be far from him. Emotions poured out as the truth was revealed. Like a long prayed-for dream finally realized the return of Lily. After nearly 2 decades, Lily returned with Jonathan to the Montgomery's mansion, her true home. Every corner of the grand house displayed wealth and history, crystal chandeliers, marble staircases, and old family portraits on the walls. As a servant helped Sophie, now Lily, settle in the receiving area, she paused, her gaze fixed on a wall with large portraits of the Montgomery lineage. Her face paled, and she stepped back, hands trembling, nearly in tears. "Lily," Jonathan called, rushing to her, concerned. She didn't speak, her eyes locked on one portrait. "That's her," she said, her voice shaking. "That's the woman. She's the one who scared me." The Montgomerys looked at the portrait she pointed to. Elizabeth Montgomery, Lily's aunt. The room fell silent, the air chilling. "Are you sure that's her, Lily?" Jonathan asked, holding her arm. She nodded, trembling. "I can't forget her, even if I didn't know her name. That face, I feared it for so long." Jonathan calmed her, assuring her she was safe with her parents. Now, after asking the staff to watch Lily in her room, he approached the Montgomerys. "I don't want to accuse, but you saw Lily's reaction to that portrait. She was gone for years, kidnapped. It's unlikely she'd forget who did this to her. I hate to say it, but it's possible she's the reason Lily disappeared." Mr. Montgomery nodded, staring at the portrait. "We understand, attorney. I don't want to suspect my sister, but I won't dismiss the possibility she's behind it." Mrs. Montgomery spoke. "If your hunch is true, we won't let it slide. We'll investigate every way possible." News spread fast. Even before they told Elizabeth that Lily had been found, she already knew, suggesting a traitor in the mansion had informed her. A servant approached. "Miss Elizabeth Montgomery has arrived." Lily froze, hearing the name, her face etched with fear. She stood, stepping back, staring at the door as Elizabeth entered, dressed in black with short hair and a cold gaze. Elizabeth approached with a forced smile. "Lily," she called, her voice feigning warmth. "Is it really you?" Lily didn't respond, standing by her parents, trembling, fighting her emotions. "I never thought we'd be together again, Lily," Elizabeth said, stepping closer. But Mr. Montgomery stepped in front, protecting his daughter, surprising Elizabeth. "What's this, brother? Why can't I approach my niece?" "You can't," Mrs. Montgomery said firmly. Elizabeth's face showed confusion, but to avoid suspicion, she acted concerned, pretending to understand Lily's trauma. Inside, she was furious at the tight security around Lily, allowing only trusted people near her, excluding Elizabeth. "We'll never let you be taken from us again, Lily," Mrs. Montgomery vowed. "Those years apart were enough. We won't let it happen again." Mr. Montgomery held Lily's hand. "We promise those who did this to you will pay. We never stopped looking for you, and we won't stop now." Lily smiled at her parents, not fully understanding but feeling their love. The investigation deepened, uncovering why Elizabeth Montgomery might have orchestrated Lily's kidnapping. The primary motive was greed. She wanted to seize the Montgomery family's wealth, including their vast Midwest properties, estates, and major companies. This would only be possible by eliminating the sole heir, Lily. On a hot day, authorities visited a prominent company owned by Elizabeth, where she was inside. The office was quiet, but the police's arrival filled it with tension. "Miss Elizabeth Montgomery?" an officer asked, approaching her desk. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow, removing her glasses and standing. "What do you want with me?" "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection to the kidnapping of Lily Montgomery 18 years ago." "What?" Elizabeth shouted, nearly dropping her documents. "I had nothing to do with that. Why are you arresting me?" "Sorry, ma'am, but we have a warrant," the officer said. Her assistant tried to calm her, but she pushed them away. "I'm calling my lawyer. I won't let you disrespect me in my own office." As if on cue, Jonathan arrived, his face serious, accompanied by the Montgomerys, dressed sharply. His eyes were sharp as he looked at Elizabeth. "Miss Montgomery," he said calmly, "let the investigation speak. The day will come when we know the full truth. If you're truly innocent, you won't be in jail long." Elizabeth's anger flared, pointing at Jonathan. "You're behind this. Don't be so sure, Jonathan. You'll pay." Jonathan didn't flinch, walking out with the police, escorting Elizabeth. Media waited outside, capturing footage as the long-hidden secret emerged. A week later, evidence piled up, pointing to Elizabeth Montgomery's role in Lily's disappearance. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and Montgomerys. Elizabeth, in a formal dress with her legal team, faced Jonathan at the prosecution table, armed with submitted evidence. The trial began formally with heated arguments. Elizabeth repeatedly denied involvement. "You have no solid evidence," she shouted. "No proof I ordered Lily's kidnapping." Jonathan remained calm, looking at Lily on the witness stand, nervous but resolute. "We have a witness to present," he said. "Someone with direct knowledge of the events." The courtroom door opened, and all eyes turned. Clara Peterson entered, the elderly woman who cared for Lily during her captivity, who had miraculously survived after Lily's escape. Seeing her, Lily stood, clutching her chest. "Clara," she whispered. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she approached the stand. "I testify that Miss Elizabeth Montgomery is behind it all," she said boldly, staring at Elizabeth, whose face drained of color. "Enough hiding." Taking a deep breath, Clara faced the judge and revealed everything. "I'm Clara Peterson. I've been Elizabeth Montgomery's housekeeper for years. When Lily disappeared, I was tasked with caring for her." She explained how her gratitude for Elizabeth's help with her child's surgery led her to comply. "For 18 years, I raised Lily, whom I was told to call Sophie, in an old building, chained and unfree." Her words hit the courtroom like a bomb. Elizabeth, pale and trembling with rage and fear, shouted, "Liar! You've been gone for years! You have no credibility!" But it was futile. The judge silenced her. Asked why Elizabeth kidnapped 8-year-old Lily, Clara answered bravely. Out of envy and greed, she wanted the Montgomery wealth, believing it would only happen if the sole heir, Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery's daughter, disappeared. Jonathan presented evidence tied to Eduardo Sanchez, a businessman known in the black market adoption world, the man who tried to take Lily from Jonathan. Bank transactions showed he received a large sum from Elizabeth 2 decades ago. After a long trial, the court declared Elizabeth Montgomery and Eduardo Sanchez guilty, beyond reasonable doubt, of kidnapping and obstruction of justice, sentencing them to life imprisonment. Lily cried on Jonathan's shoulder, and he comforted her. "Thank you. Without you, I don't know where I'd be." He stroked her hair. "All I wanted was for you to have the life you deserved long ago." After 18 years, the Montgomerys achieved justice, righting a long-standing wrong. Lily was reclaimed from the darkness of her past. Clara Peterson still faced consequences for her role, though lighter than Elizabeth's, as Lily forgave her. Jonathan Blake earned national and international recognition, dubbed the voice of justice for successfully defending Lily and unraveling the mystery that haunted the Montgomerys for so long. In an interview, when asked what drove him to fight the case so passionately, he said, "It's not just because I'm a lawyer. I did this out of principle. A woman lost her name, her identity, her family, and she had every right to reclaim it all. She was silenced, erased, forgotten, as if she never mattered. But I refuse to let that stand. Justice isn't just about laws and verdicts, it's about restoring what was unjustly taken." A warm breeze blew through the Montgomerys' mansion garden. One night before they flew to New York, the Montgomerys hosted a celebration, marking a new beginning for their family and for Jonathan, the lawyer who bridged their path to justice. Jonathan arrived with a gift for the family. Lily's face lit up with joy when she saw him. "Attorney, I thought you wouldn't make it," she said happily. "I couldn't miss this," Jonathan replied, smiling faintly. "It's our last day together, isn't it?" The family warmly welcomed him inside. As he walked through the mansion's hallway, Jonathan noticed the portraits on the walls, filled with historic Montgomery family photos. One caught his eye, making him stop and breathe deeply. It was an old photo from a family picnic, showing a young Lily happy with her parents. But at the edge stood a man in a uniform, their family driver. Jonathan's brow furrowed. He hadn't seen this photo on his first visit, likely displayed only now. "That's one of our oldest photos here, Mr. Montgomery said, approaching. "From the time of our old driver, Mr. Roy. They were such a kind couple. They said they had a son from the countryside. so they worked hard to send him to school. When Lily disappeared, they had to leave us, looking for other work. We lost our drive then, feeling we had no reason to go on, and we neglected them. Jonathan turned, unable to hide his confusion. He was my father. The Montgomerys froze. You're the son of our old driver, the Blakes? Yes. They once brought me to your estate in the countryside. I didn't meet you because something came up at your company, so I never knew what you looked like. But your last name was familiar. Looking at Lily, a realization hit him. Then Lily was the girl I played with under the tree. What do you mean, attorney? When my parents brought me to the estate, only their employer's young daughter was there, as her parents were in Chicago fixing something. She played with me. Now I see her face clearly. That girl was Lily. He couldn't believe it, but he was also happy, realizing young Lily had inspired him to pursue his dream of becoming a lawyer to defend the oppressed, so his family wouldn't be belittled in the countryside. That was you, Jonathan said joyfully. You were the first to believe in me. Lily teared up. I'm happy, even if I don't remember it. I'm glad I was part of why you became a lawyer. From his office window, Jonathan gazed at the changing city. Despite his success as cases won, people given justice a part of his heart remained empty. 3 years had passed since Lily left for New York with her family. In that time, Jonathan's reputation grew as one of the youngest lawyers with the highest acclaim. But amidst the honors, one woman occupied his mind, Lily, with no certainty of seeing her again. I'll fix myself. I promise I'll come back for you. He vividly recalled Lily's vow before leaving. He clung to it, though unsure if she still held to it. He still hoped. While flipping through documents, his office door opened. Without looking, a strange thud in his chest signaled something familiar. A voice he'd longed to hear broke the silence.
I'm back, attorney.
Jonathan's world stopped. He looked up and saw her Lily, but different. Gone was the innocent gaze of the lost girl. Now, a strong, radiant woman stood before him, mature, elegant, yet carrying the same smile that had once lit his darkest days. Lily, he whispered, standing and approaching her, her smile wide. Unable to hold back in front of his staff and clients outside, he closed the distance and hugged her tightly. Lily hugged him back, her arms tightening around him. I've missed you so much, Lily. I'm glad you're back. She nodded, her chest tight, eyes closed. I told you I'd fix myself and come back. I didn't break that promise. Jonathan looked at her. Amidst his swirling questions, one feeling prevailed, the one he'd long suppressed. Unable to resist, he gently cupped her face and kissed her. The office erupted in applause and cheers. Staff couldn't believe it. Some covered their mouths in excitement. Others shouted, "Finally!" or "Wow, attorney!" Some held up phones, recording the movie-like scene. After the kiss, their foreheads touched, both trembling with emotion. I love you, Lily, Jonathan whispered near tears. From then until now, I'm so happy you're back. I'm glad I can finally say this. Lily smiled, her once fearful eyes now filled with light and certainty. And I'm in love with you, too, Attorney Jonathan Blake. I love you so much. She hugged him. I'm here now. I'm back, and I'm not leaving again.